In the winter of 2016, I was in my senior year of high school. I had recently been accepted into my first college of choice, and I knew my grades were pretty secure, so senioritis hit me really hard. Because of this, I was looking for ways to spend my time, which I managed to fill with video games. The one video game that I was most looking forward to at the time was Persona 5. Now at this point, I was a pretty big Persona fan, and the constant delays had me feeling a bit antsy. So I decided that I needed to find something to fill the void. I remember Googling games like Persona and finding this one game on GameStop's website called Trails of Cold Steel. Now, I initially wasn't going to get it as I thought it looked a bit outdated, at least compared to what I had seen of Persona 5 at the time, and I feared that it wouldn't hit the same as Persona. I also did some light research and saw that it was the sixth game in the series, but due to a misconception about exactly how connected the Trails games were, and the desire to fill that void that I mentioned, I took a gamble on the game. On February 4th of 2016, I took my first steps in Zemuria, and that game grabbed me like few others ever have. I felt like I was spending every spare minute of the day thinking about that game. I remember theorizing on what would happen next while I was driving home from school. The game had me. And then, on February 27th of that same year, I finished Trails of Cold Steel. Needless to say, I was hooked. I needed Cold Steel 2. But seeing that that game was releasing in the autumn of that year for the West and having college to worry about, I had other things to keep me occupied. Still though, I managed to play and finish Sky FC in August of that year in the midst of this summer session thing I had to do for college. It was from there that I learned just how connected Trails truly is. By the time November of 2017 rolled around, I had caught up with the series' official English releases with Sky the Third. I don't think I need to say that I was hooked on the series, and my love for it would just continue to grow from there. However, at that point, I had a choice. I could either play the fan translations of the untranslated games, or I could wait and hope for the possibility of their official translations sometime in the future. I opted for the latter and have kept with that decision for all of this time. Seeing the many ups and downs of the series' localization has been a journey. I remember the hope I felt when the Kai remasters of Zero and Azure were released, bringing a greater possibility of an official translation with them. I remember the excitement I felt when not only were the official translations for Zero and Azure announced, but that Reverie and Nayuta would also be releasing together with those games all within the span of a year's time. And of course, I remember the joyful bewilderment I felt when the remake of the very first Trails game was not only announced in a Nintendo Direct of all places, but also that it would have a simultaneous worldwide release. This is all to say that while I could have played the fan translations for these games, I think waiting has been for the better in many ways. And now, not only have I personally finally caught up with the series, for the first time ever in the series' 22-year run, the rest of the world has now caught up with the release of The Legend of Heroes: Trails Beyond the Horizon. 聞こえるよ君の声光届かぬ場所でも遥か彼方まで天を目指して真実を知ることが後悔なく生きること空を目指して白い世界へ Now that that personal intro is out of the way, if it isn't obvious, this video is about Trails Beyond the Horizon. I want to talk about what I think the game did well, what I think it did incredibly well, and the places where I think the game could have improved a bit. I am going to structure this like I did with my Daybreak 2 video, where it will be split into a spoiler-free section, so you can hear my general thoughts on different aspects of the game, and the second part will be the spoiler section, where I will get more in-depth on my thoughts on the narrative and some theories I have for the arc and the series going forward, because hoo boy, is there a lot to talk about with this game. Much like with the Daybreak 2 video, I will start with the spoiler-free section and then give fair warning when we're about to get into spoiler territory. I will also put up some sort of text on the screen during the entire spoiler section, so you can scrub through the video to see where it ends if you don't trust my time codes. With all of that out of the way, let's get right into it. Trails Beyond the Horizon is the third and presumably penultimate game in the Calvert arc. As such, it has built a lot on the foundations set up in both of the previous games in terms of both narrative and gameplay. The actual moment-to-moment of the game is not all that different from the two Daybreak games. I mean, the moment-to-moment isn't all that different in most Trails games, but this isn't like a Cold Steel 2, Cold Steel 4, nor is it a Sky the Third or Reverie kind of game. Because of that, I did feel some fatigue going into Horizon, as the first act of the game does feel a bit samey when compared to the beginnings of Daybreak 1 and 2. Because of that, I do feel like it was my least favorite part of the game, but by no means do I think that it's bad. When entering into Act 2, however, the game switches its formula a bit, with both Acts 2 and 3 following a similar structure to Reverie with a route system. Now, the route system is very different from Reverie, as instead of there being 3 routes that are fairly even, like in that game, Van's route in Horizon is definitely the main focus, with it being the same length as the other 2 routes combined. This distribution is not an issue for me, as this is Van's game. However, I do have a slight problem with this structure that is not necessarily the result of the route system itself, but rather the game and, well, the arc as a whole. One of my biggest complaints with the previous 2 Calvert games was the lack of explorable areas outside of the towns and cities. It made it so that I felt like I had less of a connection to Calvert as a whole. This is only exacerbated by Horizon only really exploring 5 cities throughout its runtime. That doesn't sound too bad, but when you put into perspective that only one of those 5 is a new city, and that half of the game's runtime is spent in Edith, that disconnect with Calvert as a whole felt much greater in this game. I don't know, I just hope that like a good 80% of the next game is spent outside of Edith and spent throughout all of the other cities, or something like that. Because this arc is feeling less like the Calvert arc and more like the Edith arc to me at this point. But hey, at least they finally acknowledged the regions of Calvert. Honestly though, those are really my only major complaints that I have with this game, which is why I wanted to lead with them. Sure, I have some other minor complaints with certain aspects of the gameplay and story, but nothing was ever to any degree that it took away from the rest of the game for me. Speaking of the gameplay, let's talk about it. Horizon uses the same hybrid action turn-based system that was set up in the first Daybreak game, and it is hands down the best it's ever been in this game, and that includes Sky 1C, which released after this game, but we don't have to get into that right now. The action side of things got a huge overhaul. Everything feels much more fluid, even when compared to Daybreak 2. Horizon also gives you a lot more options to play around with in field combat, which makes it much less monotonous. Things like quick arts and the perfect dodge counter are back from Daybreak 2, with the latter being given a huge adjustment. Instead of the counter move switching the controlled character, it instead has a character perform their charge attack without switching out your controlled character. This is a welcome change, as while I did like the changing mechanic in Daybreak 2, I find myself just swapping back into my preferred character immediately afterwards. This change also means that you can essentially combo 2 charge attacks, which really speeds up field combat. There are also 2 completely new additions to the action side of things, those being Awakenings and the ZOC. The ZOC also has usability in turn-based combat, which I'll talk about in a bit, but in field battles, it essentially slows down time for a certain period, allowing you to rack up the damage on the beefier enemies or avoid enemy power attacks. The ZOC gauge in field battles also charges faster through landing attacks, which gives another incentive to engage in the field combat. Awakenings are essentially the self-buff crafts some characters have, but performed in the field. These greatly increase the character's damage, reduce the power of incoming attacks, and come with a passive recovery, all at the cost of the boost gauges gradually reducing when active. When switching to command battles while in this state, the character also gets a free turn with the command battle version of their buff activated. This addition is incredible for clearing mobs, getting out of a tight situation, and dealing with groups of powerful enemies. It's overall a very welcome change, however, it is one that I have a few minor problems with. Firstly, only a few characters have the ability to activate it. On one hand, I like this from a story perspective, as it clearly shows a difference in power between certain characters. Of course, characters like Van, Reen, and Shizuna are going to be more powerful than someone like Katra or Nadia. From a gameplay perspective, however, I do think it is a bit of a detriment to limit the amount of characters who can perform Awakenings, as I found there to never really be a reason to control a character who can't use an Awakening. Sure, you can switch immediately if you want to use someone else and just use the awakening ability on certain enemies, but I never really found an incentive to do that. I don't really know if there's a fix to this beyond just giving everyone a buff, but I feel like that would wreck the balancing in certain areas. All in all though, it is a minor thing, so I'd rather have awakenings in this form than not have them at all. The other problem I have with this ability is even smaller. That being that the only real way to end awakening is to switch to command battles. Now, I might personally just be dumb, which is often the case, but I could not find any button to deactivate it in the field. It wasn't a pervasive issue, as most of the time I would just end an awakening with a command battle, but it happened enough to where I just wish I could end it with the click of a button. Again, there might be a way in the game, but I just couldn't find it in my own playthrough. On the turn-based side of things, Horizon made a few significant changes for the better. Firstly are the changes to the boost system. Now, I've been pretty open about my dislike for the system, and I've said that Sky 1C's overdrive system is a much better utilization of the concept, which I still stand by even after playing Horizon. But this game has the best version of this iteration of the system for a few reasons. Firstly, you now start every battle with a max of 4 gauges instead of 3, which is something I've been wanting since Daybreak 1. In addition to this, S-Crafts now only require 1 gauge to use. Both of these are game changers, as it makes boosting much less of a scarcity, as well as giving you the option to make full use of your party's builds right out of the gate, unlike in the first 2 games. Granted, this still suffers from some of the same failings that those games had in regards to the boost system, like needing to boost to access those builds in the first place, and S-Crafts only needing 100 CP, but I've talked in length about that, so I won't rehash that here. Some other new additions that really change things up are shard commands and the ZOC. The ZOC, in regards to command battles, can be activated by boosting twice with a character, much like using an S-Craft in the previous 2 games. This allows the character to act immediately afterwards, no matter what. This can be used to give your character a second hit with an EX chain, or even the ability to reduce cast times for an art that has massive delay. Shard commands are like Brave Orders from Cold Steel 3 through Reverie, and also require boost gauges. They lack the variety of Brave Orders and are linked to the hollow cores instead of the characters themselves for the most part. But I never had an issue with these aspects of the system. They feel just as broken as Brave Orders in many cases, especially for certain commands. All of these new additions really diversify the options available and had me thinking a lot more than in the previous 2 games. My only real complaint with the combat in this game is in some of the boss design. For the most part, it was fine, but some bosses just felt like real slogs to get through. This is due to a few things. Firstly are the health pools in this game, which even on normal mode can reach insane numbers. You can deal massive damage to make up for it, but even still, hitting a boss with a fully buffed S-Craft and seeing the health bar barely move is not a great feeling. This is in addition to some new passive status boosts for bosses that either increase their strength or give them passive healing on every turn. Not every boss turn, every turn makes some fights go on for longer than they should. I also feel like some of the bosses are a little too fast and loose with the all cancel on normal attacks, which, in addition to some bosses having the ability to give other bosses 0 delay, makes some of the fights way more annoying than they needed to be. Still, on the whole, the fights were fine. Some were really good, actually. The final boss especially is one of the best in the series, even if I think it's a bit on the easier side. Another important aspect of the gameplay is the Grim Garten. This is a new and remodeled version of the American Garten from Daybreak 2, and it is so much better here. Having things like actual good rewards that scale with the player, 3 possible rewards for clearing each stage's objectives, even more rewards for different ranks on each domain, a manageable number of domains, even more relevant and interesting story content, the ability to put multiple tokens into the gacha thing at once instead of holding the X button for 3 minutes on turbo mode, and having a hub area where the characters can interact with each other are huge changes. It's still not true Reverie Corridor level, but it's a vast improvement over the American Garden in my opinion. My only real problem with it is that getting S rank on some domains can be a little tedious, which is mainly due to 2 reasons. One is when the thing that you need in order to get the S rank from the objectives might be behind 2 areas or so, which has you completing at least the first objective on those areas just to move on, as well as you not being able to even see what the objectives are in order to S rank until you've already cleared the domain. Just make it a little annoying to get the S rank on, in my opinion. Still though, I think the Grim Garden is a huge improvement over the American Garden, and if Falcom continues to use this as a system moving forward, I have no doubt they will improve upon it further. Lastly, I want to mention two gameplay aspects that I've been pretty critical of in this arc. Firstly is the customization. I've been pretty harsh on the Zyphas, due mainly to the lack of quartz variety in conjunction with the amount of slots you have available, as well as most shard skills feeling pretty useless. And while my views on the shard skills hasn't changed all that much with this entry, the variety of quartz has been increased from Daybreak 2, which already had more variety than Daybreak 1. It's nowhere near Cold Steel or Reverie levels, but I hope it gets there someday. Plus, I do like the new unique quartz and how fun they are to build with. So while I still think it could use more variety, this game is a huge step in the right direction. However, Horizon, like Daybreak 2, combined both of the tier 4 stat boosting quartz for each element into one quartz, which I'm still not sure how I feel about. The other aspect is the reward system. Now, I mentioned this in my Sky Remake video, but the reward system from the Daybreak games has been something I've been a bit irked on for a while. This was because most of the actually good rewards from those games were locked behind this system, while the treasure chests themselves felt incredibly underwhelming as a result. Horizon improves this by a lot. Firstly, rewards are mostly duplicates of items you can find or receive in other places in the game, making the rewards more of an early way to receive them. Treasure chests now have more interesting items within them, including many rare and unique quartz. It's not on the level of Sky 1C, but if that game is anything to go by, I think Falcom has reached a great balance with this system. Alright, enough talk about the gameplay, let's talk about the story, and we'll start spoiler free. So yeah, the story in Horizon is really good, and I mean really good. It's for sure the best of the Calvert games in my opinion. The tension of the mysteries surrounding the game, the motives and methods of the different groups, and the great character moments make Horizon a really memorable game for me. Now, this game is pretty much the Cold Steel 3 of the Calvert arc, so it's a lot more setup than payoff, and as a result, those character moments feel a lot more like they are meant to drum up interest rather than being moments of character growth. As a result, it's hard for me to say that there was a ton of movement for the characters, but there was an incredible amount of setup to the point that if Horizon 2 delivers, pretty much every member of the ASO will be getting some great character work. The star of the show, however, is Agnes. This is pretty much her game, and she nails pretty much all of her scenes. I was spoiled on some stuff regarding her in this game, which I will talk about more in the spoiler section, so the raw emotions of some of the scenes that I was spoiled on didn't hit as hard for me, but I do think that knowledge allowed me to see some of the expertly done foreshadowing with her. Rosette was a really good character in this game as well, and of course you have the parties of the other two routes, which, while they didn't get as much, they still had a lot of great moments. All in all, I really like the character writing in this game. In terms of the overall plot, Horizon is fantastic. My only real complaint with this aspect of the game is that it does feel like a lot of questions until the finale, which isn't a bad thing, but I feel like the characters were coming to certain conclusions later than I would have liked. It's nothing game ruining, but there were a few moments that felt a bit dragged out in that regard. I won't judge the game too harshly on that though, as it would be unfair to criticize characters for not coming to conclusions as quickly as me when I have the entire series knowledge to go on. With that said though, when this game delivers in the story department, it delivers. There were many great moments, from hype ones to emotional ones to ones that do an incredible job of setting up for the future. And if my theory for one of the themes of the arc is correct, I love how it is implemented here. Also, the different lore revelations and reframing of events from past games in the series is masterfully done. All in all, Horizon's story is incredible, as is the case for all of the main series games. Very quickly, I also wanted to mention the music before we jump into the spoiler section. Now, I'm a bit mixed on Horizon's soundtrack. It's good. I'd probably put it on par with Daybreak 2's overall, which I also liked, but that places it among my least favorite in the series. It has some real heaters, especially towards the end game with the final dungeon and final boss themes, and there are a lot of great atmospheric tracks as well. But there are also some that I'm just not a big fan of. The hacking theme and the desert theme come to mind, but also that one section in the full version of the opening is just not it for me.
Bro, cut this shit off, bro.
I gotta
Cut the shit the fuck off.
What is it?
Bro, what is he doing?
I don't know. I really don't know.
So yeah, while Horizon has some great songs like the shorter version of the opening, Battle Junction 1209, the normal battle themes, some of the new Edith tracks, Autumn Knows, The Legend of Seven, The Final Phase, and then Into Space, The Fortress of Destiny, The Cradle by Starlight, To Confirm My Existence with the World's Future at Stake, and Dies Irae, Juncture of the Dawn, it's still one of my least favorite soundtracks in the series overall. Alright, so now we get into the spoiler section, and there is a ton to talk about here, not just for Horizon, but for the entire series as a whole. So if you don't want to get spoiled, please skip to the above timecode to hear my closing thoughts. What an insane game, man. I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll lead with talking about what I was spoiled on in this game before I even got a chance to play it. The things I was spoiled on were Agnes using the Genesis to turn into that divine form thing and causing a reset, Kincaid being the White Grendel, and Giacomo being one of the Vestiges. The last of which wasn't too bad because it was mostly funny, but I do think the other two did affect my enjoyment of the game in some way. Like I said in the spoiler-free section, I think the knowledge of those reveals led me to view certain scenes and find the foreshadowing. I actually think knowing the Agnes thing made her Van Route 3 stuff hit way harder because there was a sinking feeling in me throughout it. On the other hand, though, I missed out on a lot of the shock factor and the raw emotions of some of the scenes in the finale. For that reason, I would say that out of the cliffhanger endings, this one hit me the least. I for sure am excited for Horizon 2, but I'm not as frothing at the mouth for it as I was with Sky SC, Cold Steel 2, or Cold Steel 4. Regardless, I love what Falcom did with Agnes in this game, and that confession scene really hit, especially in retrospect when you learn that she was trying to get Van to reject her so that she would have no regrets about what she was going to do. And good lord, did that Memory Orb 10 scene hit me hard. Agnes's mom telling her and Gramhart that she'll live on to make Agnes a wedding dress, like her mom did for her, but then narrating that she lied to them and listing all of the regrets she has, that scene got me. On the topic of spoilers though, I did have some things figured out about the game that weren't because of spoilers, so I don't know how those would have hit for me regardless. Like, I knew Gramhart's plan was not going to work. Still, I do wish I could have gone in without being spoiled. But hey, that's not a problem I have to worry about anymore. So let's talk about some of the plot reveals, because this game has a lot. Firstly, we've learned a bit about the barrier over Zemuria that we first learned about in Cold Steel 4. And we also learned that the Septarian of this arc, Leguiarn's Chest, the Septarian of Time, is the one who created it. We also had it revealed that it has been continuously resetting time back to the first year following the Great Collapse, and that we are currently on the 19,999th go-through of the world. I have a lot of theories on this, especially regarding the small differences between cycles. The biggest one we've heard of being the reveal of Novartis's identity, and that he was Professor Epstein's sole disciple in the previous cycle. It also appears that there is some sort of condition for the enactment of each reset. We know that Leguiarn's Chest analyzes the sin value of humanity, whatever that actually means. And I think one of the biggest factors denoting the reset is the creation of nuclear weapons. It seems pretty clear that the reset for this cycle has advanced from previous ones. My reason for believing this is that some of the stuff we've seen about resets past make me think that the cycle she came from is in the aftermath of a nuclear war, just based on how much attention is drawn to the sky of the time. Speaking of that, let's talk about some character stuff. I was right about my suspicions on Hamilton, and I am happy to see that she doesn't appear to be evil, but rather she has to do some not so great things to avert the resets, or rather to hack them. I also think this is setting up for some great stuff with Catra in the next game. And for Judith as well, given that Dominique has been colluding with Hamilton. The Vestiges themselves, I'm a little mixed on. I think we need to find out more about them before I make any hard judgments. Giacomo being one is still wild though. Why him of all people? I'm also upset at the implication that the canon choice for Olympia in Daybreak 1 is to just let Ishtanti take her out. I've already said that Olympia is my favorite Almada member, as I find her to be the most interesting, but her Chaos option seemed like the most out of character for Van out of all of them in that chapter. I just cannot see him letting that happen in any universe. Especially in context that Viola and Alexander are confirmed to be alive. So just Olympia's Chaos option being the canon one rubs me the wrong way. I hope it's some alternate universe shenanigans or something like that, because I really don't want that Chaos option to be the canon one. In terms of the other vestiges, they seem like great foils for the ASO, especially for Eren and Ferry. Eren obviously has the Tyrant, which has been set up since Daybreak 1, but I'm honestly more interested in Ferry's case, as the Soldier is really the only vestige we don't know much about. The game had the fake out with making the player and Ferry believe her to be Ida, but I'm honestly thinking it's either going to be Ferry from a previous cycle or some sort of Kruga ancestor of hers. Regardless, both of these foils are great setup for Eren and Ferry. We already saw some of it in Horizon with their boss fights, but I think the sequel will do great things for their characters. The other three unmasked vestiges I think are pretty obvious in terms of their identities. I would be very surprised if they weren't Sheena, Atkinson, and Aramis. Where my theories for them get a bit crazy is I think they are going to be connected to Van, Elaine, and Kincaid. The strongest one in my eyes is Van with Atkinson. I think Van is going to wind up being the descendant of Atkinson or something like that. There's been a few too many nods to Van recognizing stuff related to Sheena, like the statue in Daybreak 1 or the garden in this game, plus the whole thing with the fishing rod in Daybreak 2. I initially thought Agnes was going to be related to Sheena, but learning that Sheena knew Lilia and Epstein has shaken that theory a bit. I'm now starting to think that she might be related to Elaine in some ways, mainly due to how similar their swords look, and also because it would give Elaine a foil for the next game. Also, there's that whole thing with her playing Sheena in the play when she was an Aramis student. Kincaid is honestly the least likely to get a connection considering how he was the final boss of this game, so I don't see the ASO teaming up with him until late into the game at the earliest. So I don't think he needs a foil, but if Van and Elaine have this connection, I think it would be weird for Kincaid to be left out. Beyond the vestiges, we got a ton with Rosette. I love the reveal that she is from the future, or rather, most likely from a previous cycle, and that Marduk used the advanced technology from the life support pod she was found in to help advance their own technology. And that being the reason why the technology in the series has made an insane jump after Reverie. It also didn't hit me until after I beat the game, but I guess the implication is that Shannon is Rizette's grandmother that we see in the brief flashbacks and memories she has. Regardless, Rizette's stocks are through the roof. Shizuna also has some cool stuff going on in this game, stuff like the Divine Blade of Ruin thing, and her finding more of a place in the ASO. I'm really hoping that in her rematch against Doreen, she sees how Class 7 helped him overcome his ogre powers, and she realizes that the ASO can help her live with her whole deal. Mainly because I love seeing her and Reen interact on more friendly terms as sibling students, and because I love her dynamic with the ASO, so I hope she becomes a full member. Beyond the ASO though, Reen and Kevin's roots were really good. I love the reveals in Reen's route involving the Cradle and how it recontextualizes a lot of stuff from Cold Steel 4 and Reverie, as well as his confrontation with Yoon and the need to find his true blade. Kevin struggling with his mission and needing to become the Heretic Hunter again is so well done, and having him team up with the Picnicking Squad was a brilliant move, as Swin and Nadia acted as perfect counters to his hesitation. And I also love the moment where they visit the ruins of Cray. There's a real somberness to it, and that scene with Lapis gaining an understanding of the tragedy behind the destruction is incredibly well done. However, I will need Reese to be in Horizon 2 and be playable. That is non-negotiable. The finale is where the game really got me though. The reveal that Gramhart's plan was to destroy the Septarian of Time and stop the resets was really good, and I love the implication that he went to such lengths to prevent Agnes from doing what she did in the ending, which I think might be what caused her mother and grandmother to pass away at young ages. The sequence of the final bosses was also so cool. Starting with a quad fight against Qasim, Kincaid, Viola, and Alexander, then taking control of Amelia in space, fighting off the Guardians of the Septarian, then having that awesome final boss against the Grendel Shaddai, especially during the second phase when he sends your ass to space and you have to fight in field battles. Phenomenal. Pure cinema. And I think the finale puts into perspective a main theme of this arc. Trails has always had a theme of bonds overcoming any and all challenges, even the miracles of the Septarians. The main point being that one person cannot do everything, But by doing what you can and working with many others in different fields and nations, humanity can create true miracles of their own. I think what Calvard's quote-unquote problem is in this regard, in a similar manner to the corruption and political situation of Crossbell or the martial focus and class system of Erebonia, is the idea of Calvard's secrecy. Since Azure, Calvard has been set up to be the more kind on the surface but scheming behind the scenes type, in juxtaposition to Erebonia's more in-your-face aggressiveness. Many of the problems of the Calvard arc seem to stem from people keeping secrets or following their own goals and schemes. I think the idea is that Van, as someone who can move between the light and dark, is the only one who can really bridge the gap between those different factions and find a better solution. And I think the finale of Horizon perfectly shows this, with Gramhart's plan failing and his not being as transparent as he should have been, resulting in the lack of any backup plans. This, in conjunction with Kincaid and Hamilton's plans maybe messing a bit with his own, although inadvertently, led to the ending that we saw of this game. And if this is what Falcom is going for in this arc, I really dig it. It puts a lot of the earlier parts of the arc into perspective. The ending itself is pretty good, but I was a bit confused by what was happening. I guess that Agnes was able to use the Genesis to either turn Leguiarn's chest's reset into a smaller scale one so that things don't go back to 0, or that she was able to somehow transport everyone beyond the reset and prolong it somehow, but I'm still a little confused on the specifics. I also wonder why Mare seems so insistent on getting to Agnes at the end, even going so far as to use Yume to get up to her. I also don't think Agnes is going to die or even have a vastly shortened lifespan. I will be shocked if that's the case. In terms of Kincaid's whole deal, I don't know what to think. I at first thought his plan might have something to do with helping Van get rid of Vagrant's diaspora, but now I'm not so sure. I also hope Amelia is still alive, because I really like her. There's a lot more I can mention, but this video is going on for way too long at this point. Before we close out though, I do want to mention how much better Falcom has gotten at scene composition. And by that, I don't just mean the animations. Things like how the scenes are structured or how they flow. Two examples I can think of are the observatory scene in Reen Route 2 and the Amelia scene in the finale. For the former, I love how it starts out all happy and soothing with the music, and then as soon as Reen looks into the telescope, the CS4 normal ending CG pops up, and Reen sees the cradle. There's a real sense of unease with how he's in disbelief and is confused by exactly what he's looking at. And I love how it shows Mint trying again only to see the fake sky, and for Crow to be like, come on man, stop joking around, before he sees the cradle as well. It's wonderfully done. The Amelia scene is just awesome, but one particular part that I love is when it shows the fake footage of her flying in space and narrating about how free she feels. In that moment, we see her fly across the screen, and as she passes, the screen wipes into the real footage of her fighting the Guardians of the Septarian. It's just a cool as hell transition. So yeah, the story of Horizon is incredible. I have a lot to think about, and I cannot wait to see what happens at the next game. Trails Beyond the Horizon is an absolutely phenomenal game. It has the best combat of the hybrid action turn-based style so far, some great character moments, a ton of interesting reveals, and a fantastic story. This is easily a top game for me this year, and it will be hard to beat for anything that's not named Trails in the Sky second chapter. I've been thinking about how I would rank this game in terms of the series, and I think I'm pretty confident in saying it's in the middle of the pack for me. About on the same level as Azure and Cold Steel 3. I definitely wouldn't put it above Cold Steel 3, but I honestly can't decide whether I like it more than Azure or not. For right now, I'll say I'd put it below Azure, but if you ask me in a few weeks' time, after I sit on the game, I might put Horizon above Azure. Trails Beyond the Horizon is a fantastic game. It's Trails to its core, and if it's anything to go by, we're in for a real treat with the conclusion to the Calvard arc in the next game. It's peak. What else can I say? Play Trails, you won't be disappointed. As always, thank you so much for watching. This video was a lot of fun to make, mainly because it gave me the opportunity to talk about a lot of the theories I have about the Trails series moving forward, which is something I've shied away from in the past because I didn't want to say something that had the possibility of getting spoiled on a certain plot point in the series, just based on one of my theories and somebody not knowing that I was not caught up. But hey, I don't have that fear anymore. And yeah, it is surreal to be caught up with the series for the first time ever since I got into Trail series 10 years ago. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I have more coming along the way. I can't tell you when, because not even I know when, but there will be more coming in the future. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all of that. Please let me know if you played Trails Beyond the Horizon, what you thought of it. Just please be mindful of spoilers in the comments for people who have not played it or have not caught up with the series. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful week.